Well, I appreciate you guys inviting me, and for all of you brave souls who chose to spend some time here together and to listen to me. I've had the pleasure of knowing some of you for quite some time, Arlene and Orly and a few others. But it's I'm really proud of the fact that we are now a B Corp. When I started Saxbys, this business is old enough now that I think we were in operation for about 1 year before B Corp even existed. So, it's not, I wish I could say I knew I wanted Zaxby's to be a B Corp, but yeah, that wasn't necessarily in the cards. But I think for everyone that's probably on this call, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader or a philanthropist, whichever direction your career has taken you, hopefully you've had the luxury that I've had, which is to be able to pursue something that is deeply ingrained with sort of your heart and your mind and your soul. That it's not a job, but it's a calling for you. And so for me, that's what Zaxby's has been. And it certainly has not been a straight line. And I don't think it will be a straight line moving forward. I'm proud of the things that we've accomplished and who we've become and where we're going. But entrepreneurship is really, really hard. And I think trying to build an impactful entrepreneurial venture is only harder, but it's what makes it beautiful. It's what makes it worth it. It's what makes it sweet. And so, why did I become an entrepreneur, particularly a social entrepreneur, and why did Zaxby's choose to become a B Corp? So I'll take you guys back in time a little bit. I'm originally from Chicago. My parents were teenagers when they had me. So they were the first people in their families to go to college. My dad was a football player. My mom was a cheerleader at Northern Illinois University. And they were about to accomplish something great for the first times in their families. And then they had a little surprise that became a very tall surprise over the years when I was born. And it derailed my parents' ability not only to get their degree, but more importantly, to pursue what they truly love to do. I think everybody on this call probably knows and would agree that in this country, if you don't get your education, the opportunity to do what you love to do is very few and far between. And add in if you're a female and or a people of color, that opportunity is even farther from you. And I watched that firsthand with my parents. When they found out that they were going to have a kid, they dropped out of school and they took whatever job they could get. When you're 18, 19 years old and you have no degree and you have no skills and you have no training, that turns into my dad sweeping floors in a warehouse on the west side of Chicago on the graveyard shift, and my mom answering phones to the receptionist. And my parents are incredibly talented people, but those were not the jobs that they wanted to do. My dad wanted to be a coach, wanted to be a teacher, which today is exactly what my brother is. And my mom wanted to be an entrepreneur, but they never got the opportunities to be able to pursue those things. So as for 18 years living in their house, I got to simultaneously hear them complain about work nonstop. But I also got to hear them say, this is why you're going to do well in school, is you're going to complete what we started. And we believe that it will give you the opportunity to do something that you ultimately love to do. And so I tried to heed their advice, and I went away to college. When I was graduating college, I was 22 years old. I had taken a bunch of different internships in a bunch of different fields. I was a square peg in a round hole. I did finance in New York, logistics in Charlotte, real estate in Los Angeles. If you asked me on Monday, I probably wanted to be James Bond. If you asked me on Tuesday, I want to be a lawyer. If you asked me on Wednesday, I want to be something else. I was all over the place when I was 22 trying to figure it out. But I will never forget two particular phone calls I made. One was to my seventh grade teacher, Mrs. Eishen, who at the end of seventh grade strongly encouraged my parents to send me to a different school. The school that I was in was low performing. I was very hard to learn there. And my parents heeded her advice and they sent me to a private school about an hour away from where I lived. So I had a long commute every day. And it really helped sort of set the groundwork for changing my life. And then my high school basketball coach, who I wasn't fond of playing defense. I really liked offense. I don't really know who thinks playing defense is fun. I think offense is fun, but he liked defense. And he would break, anywhere between 10 to 20 clipboards a season because he'd get so mad at me for not playing defense. And he would fling clipboards. And at the end of every season, he'd make me buy him that many more clipboards. It's just a way of teaching me, like, you can't just do things one directionally. And Coach Meyer became a huge part of my life. And so I called them both when I was graduating, freaking out, feeling like I'd accomplished nothing. And they both calmly and confidently said, Nick, we went into coaching or teaching for this exact reason. to see you become a success in your life is why we chose this profession. And again, I didn't feel like I was successful in anything, but they knew my life story. They knew that I was about to get a piece of paper that proved that I had, yeah, the tenacity and the discipline to be able to go to college, complete college, and that the world could be my oyster, as it is for nearly anybody who goes to college. And I remember hanging up the phone with them and thinking to myself, I'm like, that's exactly the feeling that I want to have at the beginning of my career, at the middle of my career, and certainly at the end of my career. I want people to be able to say my life is better because that guy existed. He made a difference in my life. But I had, I'd gotten the opportunity to experience business for the first time in my life through those internships. Most of my classmates came from very successful families. And I got to meet their parents and their uncles and their aunts and all these different people. And I loved business. I know my heart races most when I do things for other people, but I think the best comes out of me when I have to be competitive and innovative, and I have to bring my A game every single day. And so my thesis, my life thesis, if you will, when I was graduating college was I want to put those two things together. I believe that I can work hard and be competitive and innovative in the business space, but it doesn't have to be that I'm going to accumulate as much money as I can over the next 40 years and then just start giving some of that money away at the end of my career and say, look, I made a difference in people's lives and I did this. I wanted to do those two things simultaneously. And today in 2021, this notion of being a social entrepreneur is fortunately a pretty common thing. I came out of school in 2000 when not only did no one really talk about being a social entrepreneur, higher ed didn't even teach or support entrepreneurship. So a lot has happened in the last 21 years, and I've been fortunate and lucky where my career trajectory has been over these last 21 years. And so, I started a business because I wanted to do well by doing good. B Corp didn't exist to give me a roadmap. Entrepreneurship and higher ed didn't exist to help teach me how to write a business plan and how to raise money. And so, I just knew I wanted a business that was going to be people centric. I don't have a lot of skills, but I think one skill I have is that I like people. I've always liked treating people well. I like learning from people. I like listening to people. I like being with people. And so I knew if I was going to start a business, it had to be something that was people centric. I like to say that my office right here where I'm standing in Center City, we're a people-centric, mission-driven business, and I think I'm pretty decent at what I do here. The floor right above us is a technology company. They build apps essentially. You could move me upstairs one floor, and I'd be the worst employee that company ever hired. Like it's just not what my heart race, makes my heart race. But this, being in a business that provides education and opportunity, is what makes my heart race. And I felt like coffee was the right way for me to do it. Because there's so low barrier to entry, both from a consumption as well as from an employment perspective. Right before COVID, Saxbys employed about 900 people. We served about 15,000 guests a day. And we would serve people that, had PhDs or were CEOs and made tons of money and wore beautiful suits out of the exact same space where someone would sadly have slept underneath the Chestnut Street Bridge the night before. But they knew that they could come into Saxbys because there was something that they could sort of afford, but we would treat them with the same dignity and respect that we would treat that, multi-millionaire CEO who was also in the space. But as I started to evolve with Saxbys, I started to realize the same commitment that we had from a consumption perspective could be applied to an employment perspective as well. And so we have in the company today, we have people who have PhDs and MBAs from some of the best colleges in the country. And we have people who have served time behind bars. We have people that were formerly homeless. And every single person in this company starts at the exact same level with the same opportunity to be able to grow. I don't know that you can do that in most businesses, but in the coffee business, you can. Coffee is, it's again, a low barrier to entry. It's exciting and interesting to a wide variety of people, but we need people that are mission driven with great attitudes, and we can teach them the skills necessary to be able to grow careers here. So coffee turned out to be perfect. So over the years, we'd obviously been building Saxbys. We started as a franchise company simply because I always wanted to grow. I felt like if we were going to impact people's lives, we needed to be able to grow. I didn't have the capital to be able to grow this business myself, and so franchising became the vehicle for that. We had enough success in franchising that it led to a private equity group and investing in the company about 7 or 8 years ago. And in my very first meeting, the head of the private equity group, who'd been in the private equity business longer than I'd been on the planet Earth, taught me a couple key lessons. The first was, Nick, we don't make money unless you learn how to spend money. I was very good at stretching a dollar because, I sort of had to self-fund the business with not a lot of self-funds. And the second thing is we're not here to run this business for you. We're going to challenge you to think critically about where you want to go, and we're going to help you take down those obstacles. And I realized not long after that first meeting that the core function of our business, i.e. franchising, was also the biggest issue with our success and growth. So we needed to find some way to sort of undo that, if you will. And so at the same time, and right around this time, I actually met Marlene Olshan, who's on this call with us as well. I started to get asked to speak in higher ed. Higher ed started to do something that they didn't do when most of us were in school. They started to teach entrepreneurship, and they were looking for entrepreneurs who would come in and speak candidly about their experience, not just how awesome they are because they're an entrepreneur, but more importantly, about how hard it is to be an entrepreneur, how many mistakes you make, how you have to pick yourself up and overcome those mistakes. And my alma mater, which is actually Cornell, is 3.5 hours away from Philadelphia. And they got a huge grant from a very, very successful self-made entrepreneur. And he wanted these students to learn from entrepreneurs in residence. So I became the first of 3, and I'm the longest tenured entrepreneur in residence at Cornell. And what perfect timing, because I think, as we all probably know, the best way to learn is to teach. So I was brought up there to teach, and I didn't know what I was going to actually be able to teach. I think for the first 3 years, I was probably doing way more learning than teaching. But what I started to see is that everybody was getting involved in entrepreneurship. And in the pedagogy of higher ed, they were looking for experiential learning. They were looking for, we could teach great things in the classroom at Drexel and Temple and CCP and Cornell, but we need, for leadership, for entrepreneurs, they need to be able to apply those things from the classroom in a real world live fire setting. And I remember driving to and from Cornell to Philadelphia. I did that every single month for about 7 straight years. I had a lot of windshield time. And at the same time that my new board is challenging me to think critically, think differently, think about why you became an entrepreneur and sort of connect those things together. The light bulb moment was, everyone's looking for entrepreneurship in the higher ed space. Our best performing cafes have historically and luckily been around college campuses. But Saxbys has always been mission driven and entrepreneurial. The reason why we wanted a franchise is because I wanted entrepreneurs involved in our business. I didn't want people in this company to feel like my parents felt in their jobs. Displaceable, replaceable numbers, just in a large org chart. I wanted people to be entrepreneurial. And so if you package that together, you'll realize that yesterday, so 6 years ago yesterday, we debuted right in the middle of Drexel's campus, 34th and Lancaster Avenue. President Fry allowed me the opportunity to work with his undergraduate students to convert 2 2-bedroom apartments. They designed it. And then every minute of every day since, it's been exclusively run by students. So we debuted our experiential learning platform there. The idea being, students are learning entrepreneurship incredibly well in the classrooms at Drexel, but how do we flip them the keys and let them then apply those things in the real world with the successes, with the failures, the lessons that they're going to learn about themselves as leaders. And so we brought that to life. And John pulled me aside that morning and said, Nick, look at this place. It had filled up with the community. The students were loving it on both sides of the bar. Those that were running the business, those that were supporting the business, said, we need this desperately in education. Every parent, every student, every employer is looking for students to be able to have power skills, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, cultural agility, things that are hard, if not impossible, to teach in the classroom. We need to partner with mission-driven, innovative organizations to help bring this to life, to give students a holistic life, a holistic education. And so over the last 6 years, we've been really heeding John's advice, and we have really pivoted our business from being a franchise company, exclusively franchise business, to nearly, at this point, 85% of our revenue comes from our experiential learning platform. Over the next year, it'll be 95%. Over the next 3 or 4 years, it'll probably be 100% of our revenue will come via our experiential learning platform, meaning 18 to 22-year-olds running their own business. So these students are taking no classes for 6 months. They get a full semester of credit. They get salary, wages, and the student CEO is managing anywhere between 30 to 70 of his or her own peers, and running on average about $1 million business. So every month they come into our office and they present their profit and loss statement, and they talk about their talent, and they talk about their challenges and their successes the same way I do with my board. We're teaching young people how to be civic-minded leaders by giving them the actual keys and allowing them to be able to run their business. And so as that started to really proliferate, you know, I started to realize like now my mind and my heart were really aligned with the business that we had created. Something was just really off when we were franchising. We weren't able to be the mission driven, impactful company I always dreamed Zaxby's could be. But experiential learning was really sort of the opportunity that started to change. So come 2018, 2019, I obviously started to hear a lot about B Corp. I started to hear a lot about this organization that was created here in Philadelphia. I'd gotten to know one of the founders really, really well. They spoke very candidly about this awesome business that they built called And One. They had tremendous success with it. They sold it to a private equity group. It was doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And that private equity group, started to run the business in a very different way than them. And less than 2 years later, the business was fully closed. Vendors lost millions of dollars in unpaid for inventory. Thousands of people lost their jobs. It was just a catastrophe. Everything that's wrong with business sort of happened in the unwinding of And One. And these guys had tremendous sorrow for that. And they wanted to be able to do something different. And they wanted to see how they could make a dent in the world of capitalism to keep those kinds of things from happening. And I think the great timing is I was really starting to find the mission for Saxbys, and we were starting to build this model that was truly doing well by doing good. Our experiential learning cafes are really successful in two ways: financially, and more importantly, we're creating the next generation of civic-minded leaders who have the confidence and the experience to graduate college and get great jobs and be ready to actually contribute in those jobs, whether it be the businesses they create or people that they go work for. And so I was starting to see what these B Corp guys were talking about right in my own business. And I think the other thing that I want to layer into that is every day I would pick up the Wall Street Journal or Fast Company or all these other things, and you flip on the TV, and I started hearing this term greenwashing, which I never really paid attention to. I didn't really know what that meant. But essentially what it means is, the advent of impact and impactful businesses was getting a lot of people's attentions. Not just historically, they've always been impactful businesses. They've just been usually small and on the fringes, and they don't have advertising budgets, and they're not nearly as well known. But the bank started to pay attention to impact and impact investing. And so all of a sudden you started to see really big companies use their sway and use their dollars to start calling themselves impactful. And honestly, it started to make me angry. It started to make me really sort of angry towards those businesses. There's one particularly very, very, very large bank who maybe is the poster child for this. And I won't call them out by name, but I say this because it was like really a turning point for me. It was why we ultimately decided to become a B Corp. But this bank was, they knew what was happening, but they were essentially allowing thousands of sales agents to fraudulently open up accounts of their clients, people who were everyday Joes who would just have their savings accounts, their checking accounts with this bank. And they had people in their company that would just open up additional accounts because it helped them. It helped them create bonuses. And, eventually this became very, very large. The federal government finds out about it, and they find out that it was known pervasively through the organization that this kind of fraud was happening in their business. And they were fined multiple billions of dollars for this, from, again, stealing from their own customers. And the CEO of the company was actually barred from ever working in the financial industry ever again. This is the CEO of a major US bank. What happened on his watch was so bad that they barred him from ever working in the only industry he'd ever worked in his entire life. And how did the company respond? Well, they had to pay this multi-billion-dollar fine. So they fired 25,000 innocent employees. They're like, well, we have to pay all this money for this thing that we allowed to happen. So let's just start crossing numbers, names, but they're really just numbers. Also, let's just start crossing them off our list. And now those people who lost their jobs, the great majority of them completely innocent, now have that bank on their resume. So how do you think it was for them to get jobs right after, this entire thing went? And so the travesty of that was like really disappointing to me, because how did that bank respond afterwards? They ran 2 years of advertising campaigns in every newspaper, every TV show. We're X years old and we are recommitting to our core values. We're going to recommit to those same core values that we had that allowed us to do this. And 25,000 plus people, lost their jobs as a result. And I remember seeing it over and over and over, and it just made me so angry because I knew that Saxbys was a business that was a vehicle for good. I knew that we were not just talking the talk, but we were walking the walk. And when I would talk to people about being an impactful business, I felt like I was talking out of both sides of my mouth, because you had banks out there talking about how they were committed to their core values and they were good for the world. And I, started to ask around about how can we take this from talking about it, and how can we start looking at it from a walking perspective. Everyone on this call knows that if you want to sell your business, you need to be able to convince a potential buyer what your business is worth. And you do that by, thank you, Eamon. You do that by showing someone your financials. Oftentimes those financials are audited by a third party firm, and then you determine what the price is based on that. But that has not existed for impact. And therefore the Wells Fargos of the world could just say, we're impactful, and just brainwash you with it, because they have a lot of money and they have a lot of outlets to be able to tell you that they're good. And I just didn't want to have that association. I didn't want what I believe is a truly, not perfect, but impactful business to have the line between them and us be blurred. And so I really wanted some sort of objective evaluation for that. And that's where B Corp really sort of floated to the top for me. And we have a great local organization here with like Impact PHL. I got to meet a lot of those folks. And they were very kind with their time to explain to me what this was. But I so gravitated not just to J. Cohen Gilbert and the founder of And1's mission around B Corp and the unbelievable work that they put in at the state government and the federal government level to have this be a recognized business entity and formation at the federal government level. But I was really, really drawn to the idea that this is objective, it's measured, and it's audited. Like, that's what really, really hit it for me, because one of our core values here is walk the talk. And I wanted to make sure that we were walking the talk. And so they convinced me about 3 years ago that, all right, Nick, you're in, you have the mindset of one of us. Now see if you could become one of us, kind of thing. And so we took the audit, and it's brutal. It's long. It's hundreds and hundreds of questions. And so we took it, and they had said to me, they're like, look, Nick, 50% of the companies that actually start the assessment never finish it. It's that daunting. It's that difficult. But again, I'm a former athlete. I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm an entrepreneur. I like those kinds of challenges. Tell me the thing is 100 feet tall and on fire, and I'm still going to probably touch it and try to be able to make it happen. And so we started it, and my two team members who took point on that were like, Nick, this is tough. This is really hard. And so we stopped about 6 months into taking it. And a lot was going on in our business. We started to grow our experiential learning platform, so we tabled it. And then J. Cohen Gilbert, one of the founders of B Corp, the founder of B Lab and B Corp, called me. I was like, hey, can I come see you? Sat down literally at the table that I'm standing at right now and said, hey, Nick, talk to me about what's going on. He convinced me to start the assessment again, and we did. And we got through the assessment. It took us a long time, and we actually got through the assessment. It's voluntary initially, and we actually got a passing score. So you have to score above an 80 to become to move into the audit phase. So we scored above an 80, and then you officially kick into the audit phase, where everything you just voluntarily answered now gets audited, like literally everything. And so we started the audit phase. It took us 1.5 years, and then COVID happened, and we weren't through the audit phase yet. We were slow in turning around paperwork. We were a fast-growing entrepreneurial business, and we just could not allocate the time to be able to turn this over. But I was so intoxicated by the depth and the rigor of this assessment and audit that it was like truly intoxicating. I couldn't get enough of it. And so COVID happened, and obviously the world stopped and changed and fell apart for many of us in many different ways. For Saxbys, that meant that on March 16th of 2020 at 5 p.m., every single one of our cafes was closed, either by the city or the college campus we were on, and every one of them stayed closed for 5 months. We didn't open another cafe until August 11th of 2020. And yes, that's tough. We lost millions and millions of dollars of revenue. And, many people would think, Nick, why don't you just let everyone go? Keep yourself, a couple other people, let them go, fight to say, to live another day. And I convinced my board, my private equity group, to not do that. That we were going to keep people together. We didn't know when COVID was going to end, but we had invested so much in this business. We had so much momentum and so much talent. I didn't want all that to go by the wayside. One of the best parts of COVID, though, is all of a sudden we had a lot of availability on our hands. We had a lot of bandwidth. And so we took our VP of Talent and Learning, we took our SVP of Strategy, who normally have 1,000 things on their plate every single day. They had very few. And we had a meeting at this table. Actually, no, it was probably virtual. We didn't do it at this table. And I said, guys, this is our chance. This is our chance to lean fully into this audit and see where we land. We might land at a 79. We might land at a 54. We might land somewhere, but we'd already made so many changes because of what we learned in B Corp and what we learned from peer companies and other industries and in our industry. I'm like, we're already a better company. I can only imagine how much better we're going to get after going through this audit process and identifying our strengths, improving upon our weaknesses. And lo and behold, 3 months later, we get a letter from B Corp saying, you guys have chinned the bar. 89.4, I believe, was our final audit number, which obviously was 10% higher than where we needed to chin the bar. And so we actually got that news very late October, early November. For those of you guys that remember, I mean, that feels like probably 14 years ago, but it was actually only about 5 or 6 months ago. The country was in a really, really tough place, particularly at that time. Obviously, we had the election coming up and all those kinds of things. So we wanted to wait for a more positive news cycle and for Saxbys to come back to life a little bit more as a business. And so in March of this year, we celebrated our B Day, so the day where we officially became a B Corp. And we closed all of our cafes early one day. We trained, we had a multi-hour training session. We had guest speakers, which included J. Cohen Gilbert, the founder of B Corp. It included Dr. Aminta Bro, who's the president of Bowie State University, which is a historically Black college in Maryland, and one of our very first experiential learning partners. So Dr. Bro, to her request and our excitement to fill that request, we opened an experiential learning Saxbys 3 weeks before Thanksgiving in 2019. So her campus has an incredibly well-run cafe right in the middle of their campus. But we had a big panel with them, went through rigorous training, not just with our leadership team, but with every single team member in Saxbys to talk about what B Corp is, why it's important, and not that we're now going to rest on our laurels, but what are the things that we're going to do next as a result of this certification? How do we get better, significantly more impactful as a result of this? But again, for me, and the last thing I'll say, and I'll stop talking for a second and flip it over to questions. The other reason why I wanted to become a B Corp, so obviously I talk a lot about sort of my life mission and what my personal path and desire is, like the impact that I want to make in this world. The second thing is the measurability, the rigor and the objectiveness. I couldn't talk my way into B Corp. Believe me, I probably tried a couple times. I couldn't do it. They're like, Nick, you could say anything you want. This is all about measurability. So I really, really appreciated that. And then the last thing is B Corp, and for me, this is only, sorry, I thought someone said, Marlene, let's go to that. Bye, Marlene. So the B Corps are only for for-profit businesses. Saxbys is a for-profit business. So what I'm betting heavily on, and I convinced my board, I convinced my private equity group, like Saxbys converted to a public benefit company. So you guys probably have read a lot about this with like the Business Roundtable last year. The Business Roundtable recently came out against shareholder primacy. Like capitalism as we all know it in our lifetimes has been defined by shareholder primacy, meaning as a leader, as an employee of a for-profit business, you only have one responsibility: to generate financial return for your shareholders. And most people believe that's what's led to the climate issues that we have. That's what's led to the wage issues that we have. That's led to so many of the seemingly insurmountable challenges in the world, because nothing has a bigger multiplying effect than business. Business is the biggest multiplying effect, positively or negatively. And a lot of smart people, way smarter than me, have identified that it's our commitment, particularly in this country, to shareholder primacy that is the root cause of all that. So we had the opportunity to convert to a public benefit company, which changes shareholder primacy. In fact, as a public benefit company, I now have signed on the dotted line. All my leadership team and my board and private equity group have now signed on the dotted line that we are committed to stakeholder capitalism, meaning my job and everybody else's job is to identify all business decisions based on how it's going to impact the totality of our stakeholders, certainly our investors, but they're on equal foot with our vendors, with our employees, with our communities. That's a huge change. So we were able to get our private equity group on board with that, our board on board with that, because my third point here of why this was important to me is I'm betting that Saxbys will be a better and more valuable business as a result of being impactful. And I think that's the most important part of B Corp and impact business moving forward is not just the changes we're going to make in society together, but we're going to prove that this is actually better for business as well. You'll attract better talent, you'll retain better talent, you'll pay your people better, they're going to impact the economy better, you're going to bring more justice to the world, and that will lead to a higher share price if you go public. That will lead to a higher valuation if you go public because those businesses are more stable and they're more long-term bankable because they're not just trying to live quarter to quarter. How do I maximize profit this quarter, this quarter, this quarter? Wells Fargo, how did they try to not impact their shareholder price? By firing 25,000 people. Wow, they must have saved a lot of money, say firing 25,000 people, but what's the domino effect negatively that that's had on those people and all those communities, those vendors? And that's just not what I wanted for Saxbys. So this, for me, sort of ties together my life mission as an entrepreneur. And now all the other people in Saxbys, like they believe in this because this is what they care about. It's not just about me. The second thing is that it is measurable, rigorous, and objective. And the third thing is I think it will be better for everyone in my business. We'll hire more people, they'll make more money, my investors will do better because this is what the future of capitalism looks like. So guys, I'm gonna stop there, flip it over to you guys. I sort of gave you my entire life story in 34 minutes, but I will flip it over to you guys for questions and redirection as you see fit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Yeah, if anyone has any thoughts, questions, please feel free to, you can either unmute yourself and ask directly, or if you want to sound off in the chat box, that's great as well. But Nick, I was curious, I knew this going in, and you mentioned Saxbys is a very people-centric organization, and people are increasingly drawn to sustainable companies or companies with some kind of social cause behind them. So I was wondering what benefits you've seen or what you anticipate, because I know this announcement is pretty recent. What the announcement as a B corporation or a certified B corporation will have in terms of attracting conscious customers and talent to your team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Jake. And that's, I think, a lot of what many of us are banking on. Like we have technically only been a B Corp for actually almost exactly 1 month at this point. I will say we've had a great past month. Like I just saw March financials, and I was quite impressed. And again, we're in challenged markets. We're in downtown high rises in college campuses, all of which are still very, very challenged. But we're starting to do really, really well. I think it's definitely helping from a recruiting perspective. Like pre-COVID, we employed about 900 people. The average age is just under 23. And so young people these days are definitely leaning in direction of wanting to see a more inclusive form of capitalism. And just think about how that's going to continue to move forward. I mean, you figure if you look at millennials and Gen Zs, these are people that have lived through the Great Recession now. They're living through, obviously, the COVID crisis. They're living through really sad racial justice problems that are finally bearing themselves out in this country. Like they're watching people lose jobs. Like they're watching, all kinds of challenging things. And what we have historically seen is that makes people want change, and change particularly in the business world. So I think that we're definitely seeing a great benefit in on the recruiting side. I think on a college campuses, like one of the things that we talk about is to college campuses, you have a living, breathing B Corp right on your campus. You ask college business professors and you ask most students if they know what B Corp or impactful businesses are, they'll say yes. You ask most people that are maybe a little bit older and they're in larger companies, they'll usually say no. We're not necessarily trying to convince those people. We're trying to support those college professors and the college students who come to college at 18 or 19, saw mom and dad's experiences in the business world, might have probably have bad experiences with it, thinking businesses are bad. They can instead learn the context of business through an experiential learning Saxbys right in the middle of the campus. It's a great opportunity. So I think that we're already starting to see benefit from a revenue perspective. We're already seeing such a great sort of tailwind from a recruiting perspective. And if that can continue through the balance of this year, through next year, I think it starts to play out in Saxbys, becoming a really successful business, not in spite of being a B Corp, but because we're a B Corp.
Gotcha. Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. Talia asked, is it easier to become certified B Corporation after you've been for-profit company first?
So after you become, so you have to be a for-profit. So you cannot attain B Corp as a nonprofit. So I think that's one of like the critical differentiators, is that you have to be a for-profit. I do believe that becoming a B Corp early stage of your business is going to be a little bit easier than waiting 15 years like I did, and having a lot of different people and a lot of different real estate and a complicated capital table. I really encourage entrepreneurs getting ready to start out. You have to have a certain amount of runway. I think you have to operate for a year. I forget exactly what their requirements are, but I really encourage people to do it in the early stage. Not only because you'll learn all the sort of right standards and expectations of how to run your business early on. Like, you won't have to change bad habits or change bad protocols. We have to change a lot of things. You'll just build your business to those protocols. It will become second nature. It will become habitual for you to be able to do it. So that would be my my encouragement, if I'm answering your question correctly.
Yep, great. Heidi says, love your talk. Thank you. I wonder how you see changes to the business moving forward on some campuses where more students may continue to be hybrid or online.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's certainly something that we're trying to pay great attention to. I think that the higher ed model, particularly in the 4-year model, like the Drexels, the Temples, the Penn States, they're heavily indexed towards and heavily invested in the in-person experience. And I think it's going to take a long time for that to unwind itself. You have expensive dorms, expensive buildings. You have a lot of things on campus, and so I think that we are betting on the in-person experience still being a huge part of, meaning like 80, 85, 90% of the college experience being in that direction. But I do think that one of the great opportunities here is to bring people in who have not had the higher ed experience once, but have not had the higher ed experience. And a great way to be able to sort of get them at least halfway is through the virtual world, and then potentially be able to opt into the in-person. So everything that we're seeing with all of our partners is, I think all but one have announced that they're bringing campus back at full capacity in the fall. So that's where a lot of the intention is. I haven't done any scientific research on this. We employ a lot of young people. They want the in-person experience, and I think that like they've done a good job and they work hard off of Zoom, but it's really hard to get the holistic experience educationally exclusively through the Zoom experience. So I think we're going to see the pendulum was here, meaning it was like almost nobody did online, and then we were forced to make the pendulum go all the way over here. I think the pendulum's going to start to settle a little bit more here, but I think that it's going to mostly come with people being on or around college campuses, which is a great part of that 4-year experience, is being able to go to sporting events and going to theater and being able to support your friends and socialize with your friends. I still think that that's a huge and very valuable part of the higher ed experience. And I think that we'll continue to see that bounce back.
Right. Tim asks, what were some of the specific and difficult obstacles to overcome in the assessment process, especially as a retail company, other than just the rigorous nature of the impact assessment and audit?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot sort of on the HR policy side that was really challenging for us. For example, we didn't have a maternity policy, because when your average age of your team members is under 23, there was never really a reason for us to have a maternity policy. But that was a bad thing for us to not have. So now we have a maternity and a paternity policy, in place. And so there were just a lot of things that we just didn't have policies for. And their experience is, if you don't have policies, you're probably not going to default in the direction of doing it in a positive way for your people. You're going to default in doing things in a negative way. You're going to default in doing it in a benefit for the business, not for the people. And so the policy side was huge for us. I think the second thing is that, if you look at like in all of our years of experience in business, we've heard things before of like double bottom line, triple bottom line, all these different things. Like what I think is sort of like really elevating to the top right now is ESG. So environmental, social, and governance. And I think part of the reason for that is just that's what Wall Street has grabbed onto. Arguably the highest performing segment of the stock market in the last 14 months has been impact investing. And they talk about that through the lens of ESG. You can't listen to Goldman CEO Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan. Like, you can't listen to any of these guys talk now without them talking about ESG. So I think when you look at the continuum of ESG, environmental, social, and governance impact, Saxbys has always been, we scored by far the highest in social and governance. We're 70% female and or people of color at every level of the organization. So we've always been strong on the governance side. We've been, as I like to say, we've been philanthropic before we were profitable. So this is a company that has always scored well, or not always. We scored very high on the social side. We did not score high on the environmental side. That was a very, very challenging section for us, because I think, one, it was never anything that I knew much about. So I leaned into the things that I knew and that I was passionate about, and sort of leaned away from the things that I didn't know or I wasn't passionate about. And so, our carbon footprint, our environmental footprint is relatively significant. We travel the world buying coffee. We bring it to Philadelphia and we distribute it to a lot of places. We serve 15,000 guests a day with all kinds of consumables that get thrown out in the trash. And so that was a section that was really hard. It was hard for us to fill it out because we had to go and talk to our vendors, and we had to look at a lot of things that we've never even thought about, let alone measured before. That was really hard, but that's also going to become a big area where we're going to be focused, as we realize what a great opportunity we have. We scored low. That means we really only have one direction to go, and that's up. And I think that's going to be exciting and a great challenge for us.
Excellent. Orly asks, do you see Saxbys as a way to increase visibility and validity of B Corps across the country?
Absolutely.
Nick, what I was thinking there is, just like you've sort of created this experiential platform, in hospitality, do you think that you could become, that kind of voice for B Corp now that you've embraced it?
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge part of my motivation, Orly, is I think that, we have the benefit of being a B2C business. We operate bricks and mortar cafes. We're very visible. And that is, that cuts both ways. You're quick to get exposed if you're not doing the right things, but you could be really quick to educating people and taking people on in this journey and allowing them to, supply. Like, I see now, like, we get so many packages now of like all kinds of environmental products and all these things. Like, we're clearly on the radar now of people that are trying to push along impact. And I think that that's one of the reasons why J. Cohen Gilbert has spent as much time with me as he has, is that he realizes that, like, one of the key things that they preach to you when you're considering becoming a B Corp and you actually chin the bar and become a B Corp is like, now your goal is to support your fellow B Corps and pervasively push forward the mission. It's like, we're trying to make a revolution together. And some of us just have more of an opportunity to help in that because we're B2C. That really helps us. And because the C for us, not just the C, but really the E, the employee, are young people. It's much harder to change someone's mind and life when maybe they're 75 or they're 80 and they've seen things one particular way. It's a whole nother thing when they're 18, 19, 20. What we see now is, I think our measurement is 80% of the people that we employ at our college cafes, we are the first job they've ever had. Wow. Yeah, so when you look at the age of first jobs, it's changed a lot. Like, for those that I can see on this call, most of us were raised at a time where we were probably working at 14, 15, 16. I worked at McDonald's since I was 14 and a half. And, it's different today. Generally speaking, it's different today. So in most instances, we are the first employer that anyone's ever had. What an amazing opportunity for us. What an amazing opportunity for us to teach young people what a great, impactful business looks like. And again, we are not perfect. There's a lot of things that we are working hard to improve, but we're doing something right by being a B Corp and being as transparent as we are. Like, that's a big part of B Corp, is that like all of your scores, all of your efforts are transparent. They're visible. Like, people can see them. And so we took impact training, was almost like an elective. Like, when people went through training at Saxbys, you could elect into DE&I training. You could elect into impact training. DE&I and impact training are no longer electives at Saxbys. Like, you can't get promoted here without cash handling, without barista skills, without opening and closing procedures. You also can't get promoted now without DE&I training, without impact training, without B Corp training. We've built that into the core and the center of our business. So yes, it is a huge motivation for us, Orly, for us to be able to be visible and help sort of recruit into this mission. I see it like my wife owns a yoga Pilates studio. It's been in business for 12 years. She's finishing up her B Corp assessment right now. As you know well, Orly, I spend a lot of time in higher ed. I think I'm on faculty at 3 or 4 different schools. I'm on the board of CCP. I make myself visible and I make myself reachable because it is my responsibility. It is my requirement to help educate, help learn from people, but also help bring more businesses into this mission. This is how we change the world.
Thank you so much, Nick. Yeah, that's very, I'm actually teaching, at Jefferson in their sustainability program. And I'm working now with a group of students I'm building a startup with a sustainability component. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to hear your talk, because I can literally bring it right back to my class tonight. So thank you.
It's great, Orly. I mean, I remember I'm a member of this organization called YPO. It used to stand for Young Presidents Organization, but they don't use the word young anymore. But it's essentially for CEOs or presidents or managing directors where you're running a certain size business. You have to have a certain amount of revenue and you have to be under the age of 45 while you're doing it. And so it's like, you're each other's therapists essentially to learn how to run a business and a challenging business. And so anyways, the YPO group of Philadelphia went on a retreat 3 years ago to Boston. And there was the big day event was you were going to get broken randomly into 3 buses and you were going to go to 3 different things. And I'm a very curious and nosy person. And so I was trying to figure out what the things were. And I heard one of them was you were going to go and meet with the CEO of the Boston Red Sox. And I was a college baseball player. So I'm like, they're going to put me on that bus. One of the other people you got to meet with was the CEO of Bain Private Equity. I was like, I want to be on that bus. So I figured out who was like making the determinations. I pretty much, convinced him to put me on that bus, and we go. And we're sitting at the top of Bain's headquarters in the center of Boston. And all he wanted to talk about was, he's like, look, we now have our 9th vertical of investment at Bain. So healthcare, technology, blah, blah, blah. Our 9th vertical we just created is called Double Impact. He's like, here's what it is we're going to invest in businesses that are equally focused and successful in both impacts, ESG and financial impact. And he's like, we thought we were crazy, but we think that this is where the future is going. So we raised all this money internally and we took it to the street and we oversubscribed a $750 million round. And I was like, whoa, $750 million round. I'm like, that's a big, or fund, I should say. That's a big fund, because that was one of the critical challenges of impact in business for so long, is that most impact funds were small, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million. So if you got money from them and you grew large, now you had to play in a world where no one cared about impact anymore. There was no value to that. But I'm sitting here in Bain. Bain has raised $750 million to do this. And guess what's happened in the last 3 years? They've raised a second one for over $1 billion. TPG, huge private equity group, has raised 2 multi-billion-dollar private equity, double impact funds. KKR, the most private equity of all private equity, now has a $1 billion impact fund. And so that was another huge turning point for me, was where you can build impactful businesses and actually scale impactful businesses, and that you'll see value creation, not just when you're small or even medium sized, but sort of all the way up. And I think that that's arguably the biggest turning point of all this, is if the money is there, the entrepreneurs will follow.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thanks,
really,
Orly.
really appreciate it.
Great to see you.
All right. Yeah, we have a couple more questions here in the chat. Aaron asks, what difficulties have you encountered maintaining a an apolitical stance in a world that is ever more demanding, to know where a corporation stands politically. And additionally, working with the higher education environment that can amplify that pressure.
It's a great question. It's really hard. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah, I would say July, no, May and June were really, really difficult periods because, obviously we had the murder of George Floyd and, all of the issues that understandably happened across our cities, including here in Philadelphia, and we had one of our cafes, 1717 Arch, things were thrown through the windows and broken. And I posted an Instagram picture of our broken window. And then I talked about like me having to come to terms with sort of the privilege that I have unbeknownst to me as being a white male, and it forced me to think. And 99% of the people were incredibly supportive. And then 1% of the people would reach directly out to me and be incredibly critical or ask for conversations. And I just started to jump on calls with people. And I even had a couple team members of Saxbys, people of color, who were like, Nick, I just don't think we do anything for people of color in our company. And so we had some really good dialogue. And I reminded one of the young men, I said, his name was Gary. I said, Gary, we just spent $500,000 to open an experiential learning cafe at Bowie State University. And I was like, we're no perfect company by any means, but I think that like we also need to be mindful and proud of, we've taken a leader. Most people didn't even know what HBCUs were until this summer, Mackenzie Bezos's donation. I'm like, we've been involved at HBCUs prior to any of this. And so it's been really difficult to understand where to put your voice, where not to put your voice, because I've been criticized for not speaking out on many things as well. And so it's hard. I don't have a right answer, but I do know one thing is that my commitment is much more to walking than to talking. There's a lot of companies out there that talk and talk and talk. We saw a lot of companies in May and June of this year commit to all kinds of DEI things and commit to all kinds of hiring. And believe me, I have a lot of calendar reminders at that period over the next years forward to see what they say. How do they follow up on those things? Or did they just put things out on Instagram and press releases to talk and get people off their back? Or do they walk? And we've been very, very focused on walking. We've been focused on hiring. We've been focused on promoting. Arguably the single most impressive thing in all of our impact survey, of our B Corp survey, is that there's a section for people. And if you promote 15% or more of your people in 1 year, you're considered world class. You max out one of the largest scoring sections in all of B Corp, because that's what it's about, is like not just hiring people, but do you train them and develop them upwardly in your business? Saxbys promoted 49.7% of our people within 1 year over the 3-year look back of our assessment. 50% of our people were promoted in 1 year. And so when you layer in how diverse our company is and how much we promote, I'm very focused on sort of the walking versus talking. But unfortunately, being a quote unquote CEO, having a visible business, it does cut both ways. We're trying to sort out how do we talk while we walk, because when you talk while walking, it seems like you're gloating, or you seem like you don't make mistakes, or that you're perfect, because that's not obviously the case. And so it's very fragile. It's very, very difficult these days. And if you've got recommendations, please send them my way. I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to do this as well as I possibly can.
All right, thank you. Robert asked, could you speak a bit about Saxby's experiences on meeting the environmental sustainability requirements for B Corp?
Yeah, I think there's really two key things that we're going to be focused on. The first is like our carbon footprint, particularly our carbon footprint of the way we move coffee around the world. We buy coffee from 10 different countries on 3 different continents, and so how we move that product is really important to us. The second thing is obviously the consumables. Is figuring out how we overhaul our supply chain to better account for all these consumables that we buy, that we distribute, that we throw out, that we buy, distribute, that we throw out. So, we're engaging with a firm outside of Saxby simply because we're not experts on this, and so we've engaged with a couple different firms actually that are going to are helping us currently evaluate the areas where we can get better. And it's hard for me. Like I want to decide, all right, I'm going to run a marathon, and then I want to run a marathon tomorrow. And it's just not, I'm not capable of running a marathon tomorrow. Like we're going to have to figure out how to run a mile first, run 5 miles first, run half a marathon, and try to start getting there. But we want to put together the plan to run a marathon and then start getting running, is really what we're working on. But more to follow on that, because that was really the biggest area that we identified and we talked to our team members about. Is this is an area of great opportunity for us as a company.
Okay, great. Yeah, and another question from Talia. I think this will be our last one, potentially. As you change your company's core values to have more of a social impact, how do you shift the company's and employees' culture?
Yeah, I mean, so the good thing is the only core value we changed was walk the talk. That was the only one we changed. Our core values have always been sort of social impact oriented. So we didn't have to change much. It was much more of like rallying around the things that we were doing, measuring those things, and starting to talk about them more. That was the biggest thing. I think as we evolve the business, the biggest challenge that we have right now is we're going into pretty aggressive growth mode. And I think that the challenge that I'm having as a leader is our people are tired. Like our people are very, very tired. Yeah, it's been a very hard last 12 to 14 months. And, I think that we have a lot of people at Saxbys, me included, who are just sort of like, put the smile on. When someone asks you how you're doing, you say great, and you start moving forward. But, we have a lot of growth in front of us. We're opening 7 new experiential learning cafes this fall. So we're going to literally grow our experiential learning footprint by 50% in the next 5 months, including moving geographies for the first time. So we're opening 2 experiential learning cafes at the University of Pittsburgh this fall. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we have right now as an organization is overcoming this fatigue that so many people have, and knowing that we're going to be bringing on a lot more team members. How do we balance this notion? Because there is a stigma to being a B Corp or an impact business, which is like, 30-hour work weeks, P&Ls don't matter, like let's just hold hands and skip around and be happy. And that's not who we are. And that's not what B Corps are, is like B Corps are more successful when they grow. The world is better when they grow. And so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for us, is like rest and recovery for our existing team, while bringing people on who respect and are excited about B Corp, but know that our impact has just started. Our greatest growth, the greatest impact that we're going to have is really going to be what's coming forward. So I think that's the needle that we have to try to thread right now as a company. That is hard. It is. I have a 2.5-hour meeting later today that's really focused sort of on that. Like, how do we take advantage of this growth and do it in a way that's culturally centric to Saxbys with talent that is a little tired right now?
Great. All right. Well, perfect timing. We're at 1 p.m. and that's all the questions that came through. So Nick, thank you. This has been great. It's been awesome to hear your story and your insights, and really appreciate you taking out the time for us.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Tracy. Great to see everyone. Thank you so much for having me.